I know exactly why you're here at 3 in the morning, staring at this screen with tears in your eyes. I know your soul is screaming with the desperate question that haunts every quiet moment. Does God even hear me anymore? I know you wake up each day wondering if your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, if your words are dissolving into empty air, if the God you've trusted for so long has somehow stopped listening to your voice. Your heart is breaking with the terrifying possibility that maybe you've done something so wrong that heaven has closed its ears to your cries. Today, I am the messenger who comes to shatter every lie the enemy has whispered about your connection to the throne of grace. Your prayers are not falling on deaf ears, they are creating earthquakes in the spiritual realm that you cannot see with your natural eyes. This is not another religious speech that tells you to just keep praying without giving you real answers. This is the revelation that will transform your understanding from abandoned child to beloved heir, from ignored supplicant to priority petitioner, from silenced voice to powerful intercessor whose words move heaven and earth. Do you recognize yourself as someone desperately needing to know that God still hears every word you speak to him? Comment here if your heart is crying out for confirmation that your prayers still matter to the King of the universe. I understand the crushing weight of silence that makes you wonder if God has forgotten your name. I feel every ache of your heart when you pray with passion, but see no visible change in your circumstances. How many nights have you poured out your soul in desperate prayer, only to wake up to the same problems, the same pain, the same seemingly unchanged situation that drove you to your knees in the first place? You feel abandoned because you don't understand the hidden mechanics of how God processes the prayers of his children. This is not divine rejection, it is celestial preparation that is orchestrating answers so magnificent that your current understanding couldn't contain their fullness. But today I will reveal the spiritual truth behind why God sometimes seems silent when he is actually working overtime on your behalf. Prepare yourself, because this hidden knowledge will transform not just how you pray, but how you understand the entire communication system between heaven and earth. When Jesus taught his disciples to pray, he didn't give them a formula to convince God to listen. He gave them access codes to a communication system that was already established before the foundation of the world. He revealed that God's ears were already tuned to their frequency, his heart already inclined toward their requests, his power already mobilized for their breakthrough. The question was never whether God would hear them, but whether they would understand how he responds. You see, God doesn't just hear your prayers, he collects them like precious treasures in golden bowls that are stored around his throne. The book of Revelation reveals that the prayers of the saints are kept as incense before God, creating a constant fragrance that rises in his presence. Every word you've ever spoken to him in faith, in desperation, in hope, in confusion, is preserved in heaven's archives as evidence of your relationship with him. Your prayers don't disappear into the void, they accumulate in the presence of God until the perfect moment for their release. Think of your prayers like seeds planted in heaven's soil. Some prayers sprout immediately because the conditions are perfect for instant manifestation. Some prayers require a season of growth because God is preparing you to handle the magnitude of the answer. Some prayers need time to develop because God is orchestrating multiple circumstances to create the perfect answer that exceeds anything you originally asked for. But every single prayer you plant in heaven's soil is growing, developing, and preparing for harvest at exactly the right moment. The silence you interpret as God not hearing is actually God working behind the scenes with the precision of a master craftsman who refuses to release his masterpiece until it's absolutely perfect. Here's what most believers never understand about God's response system. He doesn't just answer prayers, he improves them. When you pray for provision, God doesn't just send money. He prepares blessing systems that will sustain you for years. When you pray for healing, God doesn't just fix symptoms. He transforms your entire health foundation for lasting wellness. When you pray for relationships, God doesn't just patch up problems. He orchestrates connections that will bless generations. This improvement process takes time, coordination, and divine wisdom that operates far beyond your current perspective. God hears your immediate request, but he responds with eternal solutions. He catches your emergency cry, but he answers with comprehensive transformation. He receives your desperate plea, but He provides abundant overflow that addresses needs you didn't even know you had. The delay is not rejection, it's divine enhancement of everything you thought you were asking for. But here's the most powerful truth about God's hearing. He doesn't just listen to your words, He interprets your heart. When you pray for one thing but your heart needs another, God responds to what you actually need, not just what you think you want. When your words say, "Change my circumstances," but your heart cries, "Change me," God addresses the deeper request that will transform your life permanently. When your mouth asks for temporary relief but your soul yearns for permanent breakthrough, God works on the level that will satisfy your deepest longings. This is why sometimes it seems like God isn't answering your specific request, when in reality, He's answering the request your heart is making, that your mind hasn't even formed into words yet. Are you beginning to understand that God's silence doesn't mean He's not listening, but that He's preparing answers that are so much better than what you asked for that He needs time to orchestrate them perfectly? Comment, "better," if your spirit is catching this revelation of God's superior response system. The prophet Isaiah revealed that God's thoughts are higher than your thoughts and His ways higher than your ways. This doesn't mean He's ignoring your thoughts and ways. It means He's elevating them to levels that your current understanding can't even imagine. When you pray from your limited human perspective, God hears you from His unlimited divine perspective. When you ask based on what you can see, God answers based on what He knows is coming. When you request according to your current capacity, God prepares according to your future potential. This divine elevation process requires time, patience, and trust that God is working even when you can't see evidence of His activity. Your prayers create ripple effects in the spiritual realm that extend far beyond your immediate situation. When you pray for your family, God begins orchestrating connections and opportunities that will bless your bloodline for generations. When you pray for your finances, God starts positioning resources and relationships that will establish lasting prosperity in your life. When you pray for your health, God activates healing processes that address not just current symptoms, but future vulnerabilities. Your individual prayers become part of a master plan that God is weaving together for your ultimate good and His ultimate glory. The delay you're experiencing is not evidence that God doesn't hear you. It's proof that He loves you too much to give you anything less than His absolute best. But now I must reveal the hidden truth that will completely revolutionize your understanding of why some seasons feel like God has gone completely silent. God's apparent silence is not punishment, abandonment, or indifference. It is the most intimate form of divine communication that exists, reserved only for those He trusts enough to walk by faith when feelings fail and circumstances lie. When God seems silent, He is actually speaking in a language that transcends words, sounds, and visible signs. He is communicating through the deep work He is doing in your character, your faith, your spiritual maturity, and your capacity to handle greater levels of His glory. Think about how earthly relationships deepen over time. When you first meet someone, communication requires many words, constant reassurance, and obvious demonstrations of care. But as relationships mature, you can communicate with glances, understand each other's hearts without explanation, and trust completely, even during periods of apparent silence. God's relationship with you is maturing to levels where He no longer needs to explain every step of His process, because He trusts your love for Him to remain constant, even when His methods seem mysterious. The silence you interpret as abandonment is actually God's way of saying, "I trust you enough to work behind the scenes without needing to report every detail of my activity." It's His expression of confidence in your spiritual maturity, to believe in His goodness even when you can't trace His hand. It's His invitation to graduate from needing constant confirmation to walking in unwavering faith that He is always working for your benefit. This level of divine trust is not given to immature believers who need constant encouragement and visible proof. It's reserved for those who have developed enough spiritual muscle to stand firm in the darkness, knowing that God's silence doesn't mean God's absence. Do you realize that God's silence in your life is actually a profound compliment to your spiritual growth and His confidence in your faithfulness? Comment, trust. If you're recognizing that divine silence might be divine honor rather than divine rejection, But here's where most believers make the critical mistake that prolongs their season of apparent silence. Instead of recognizing God's silence as an invitation to deeper intimacy, they interpret it as evidence of distance. Instead of understanding the silence as preparation for greater revelation, they assume it means communication has been severed. Instead of seeing the quiet season as a setup for a dramatic breakthrough, they conclude that God has stopped caring about their situation. This misinterpretation creates a cycle of doubt that actually interferes with God's ability to work on their behalf. When you begin to doubt that God hears your prayers, you start praying with less faith, less expectation, and less authority. When you assume God has stopped listening, you begin to pray defensively instead of boldly, apologetically, instead of confidently. When you believe your prayers don't matter, you start praying with the energy of someone begging instead of someone who has legal access to the throne room of heaven. This shift in your prayer posture actually creates static in your communication with God, not because He stops listening, but because you stop believing He's listening. Faith is the currency of heaven, and doubt creates exchange rate problems that complicate the divine transaction process. But when you understand that God's silence is often His loudest declaration of trust in your relationship with Him, everything changes. You begin to pray with the confidence of someone who knows their words are treasured, not ignored. You start interceding with the authority of someone who understands their access to God is permanent, not conditional on immediate visible responses. You continue petitioning with the persistence of someone who knows that delay doesn't mean denial, but development. This transformation in your prayer life actually accelerates God's response because you're now operating in faith instead of fear, trust instead of doubt, expectation instead of desperation. The Bible reveals that God's delays are not denials, and His silence is not rejection. Abraham waited 25 years for the promise of Isaac, but the delay produced a miracle baby who became the father of multitudes. Joseph spent years in prison after receiving his dreams, but the delay positioned him to save nations during a worldwide famine. David was anointed king as a teenager but didn't assume the throne until he was 30, but the delay prepared him to be Israel's greatest monarch. In each case, what seemed like God not responding was actually God preparing responses that exceeded anything they could have imagined if their prayers had been answered immediately. Your season of silence is your season of divine preparation for answers that are so magnificent, they require this time of hidden development. God is not ignoring your prayers, He is perfecting His responses to them. He is not deaf to your cries, He is orchestrating solutions that will silence every doubt about His goodness in your life. He is not absent from your situation, He is arranging circumstances that will demonstrate His presence in ways that will leave you speechless with gratitude. The hidden answer to your question, "Does God still hear my prayers?" is not just yes, but God hears your prayers so clearly that He's working overtime to give you answers that are infinitely better than anything you've asked for. Your prayers have been heard, recorded, treasured, and are currently being processed by the divine department that specializes in exceeding expectations and surpassing human imagination. The silence is not the sound of God's absence. It's the sound of heaven's preparation for your breakthrough. Now comes the revelation that will forever change how you understand the spiritual mechanics of answered prayer and divine timing. There exists a hidden dimension of prayer that most believers never discover because they're too focused on immediate results to recognize the profound process that God uses to craft perfect answers. Your prayers don't just reach God's ears, they activate an entire celestial system of divine coordination that involves angels, circumstances, people, timing, and spiritual forces that must align perfectly before your answer can manifest in the physical realm. When you pray, you're not just talking to God, you're initiating a complex divine operation that requires supernatural coordination across multiple dimensions of reality. Think of your prayers like placing an order for a custom masterpiece from the greatest artist in the universe. You don't just tell the artist what you want and expect it to appear immediately. The artist must gather the finest materials, design the perfect plan, coordinate with skilled craftsmen, and invest the time necessary to create something that exceeds your original vision. God responds to your prayers by crafting answers that are so precisely designed for your specific situation, personality, timing, and future needs that they require extensive divine coordination to produce. He doesn't just hear your request and snap his fingers to make things happen. He initiates a process that involves rearranging circumstances, preparing people, shifting spiritual atmospheres, and timing events so that when your answer arrives, it fits perfectly into your life like a puzzle piece designed specifically for that moment. This divine coordination process is invisible to human eyes, which is why it sometimes seems like God isn't responding when He is actually orchestrating the most intricate answer you've ever received. Your prayers are simultaneously creating activity in heaven, on earth, and in the spiritual realm that you cannot see but that angels are amazed to witness. When you pray for provision, God begins moving in the hearts of people you haven't met yet, who will become part of your blessing. When you pray for healing, God starts coordinating medical discoveries, doctor appointments, and healing processes that will intersect at precisely the right moment. When you pray for relationships, God initiates divine connections that require months or years of preparation to bring the right people into your life at the perfect time. Every prayer you pray sets in motion a chain reaction of divine activity that extends far beyond your immediate awareness or understanding. Are you beginning to grasp that God's apparent silence is actually the sound of heaven working overtime to coordinate answers that are so complex and comprehensive that they require extensive divine project management? Comment working if your spirit is catching this revelation of the invisible activity your prayers generate. But here's the most astounding truth about how God processes your prayers. He doesn't just answer them individually, He weaves them together into a master plan that addresses every aspect of your life simultaneously. While you're praying about your finances and wondering why God seems silent, He might be preparing an answer that will simultaneously solve your financial needs, introduce you to your future spouse, position you for a career breakthrough, and heal a relationship you thought was hopeless. While you're focused on one specific request, God is orchestrating a comprehensive transformation that will exceed every prayer you've ever prayed. Your individual prayers become threads in a divine tapestry that God is weaving to create a life story so beautiful and complete that you'll spend eternity marveling at the perfection of His design. This is why timing is so crucial in God's response system. If He answered your prayers in isolation, you might receive good things, but you wouldn't receive the perfect things that come when all your prayers are answered in divine coordination with each other. If He responded to your requests immediately, you might get quick fixes, but you wouldn't get comprehensive solutions that address the root of every issue in your life. If He granted your wishes individually, you might experience temporary improvement, but you wouldn't experience the total life transformation that comes when God answers all your prayers as part of one magnificent plan. The waiting period is not empty time where nothing is happening. It's preparation time where everything is happening behind the scenes to ensure that when your breakthrough comes, it's so complete and perfect that it will establish you for the rest of your life. God's silence during this coordination period is like the silence in a theater before the curtain rises on a performance that will leave the audience speechless. It's like the silence in an orchestra before they begin playing a symphony that will move hearts to tears. It's like the silence before sunrise that precedes the most glorious dawn you've ever witnessed. The silence is not the absence of activity, it's the preparation for revelation. But there's something even more profound happening during these seasons when God seems quiet. He is using the silence to develop your capacity to receive and appreciate the magnitude of what He's preparing to give you. If you received your breakthrough today with your current level of spiritual maturity, you might take it for granted, mismanage it, or fail to recognize its true value. But God is using this waiting season to deepen your gratitude, strengthen your faith, increase your wisdom, and expand your capacity so that when your answer arrives, you'll be ready to receive it fully and steward it properly. The silence is not punishment, it's preparation for promotion. The delay is not rejection, it's development for reception. The apparent inactivity is not abandonment, it's advancement toward your divine appointment. Every day of waiting is making you more ready for the day of receiving. Every moment of silence is increasing your appreciation for the moment of breakthrough. Every season of hiddenness is preparing you for your season of manifestation. God hears every prayer, but He responds according to His perfect wisdom, timing, and love that always works for your ultimate good and His ultimate glory. But now we arrive at the moment that will determine whether you continue living in doubt about God's attention to your prayers, or step into the confidence of knowing that every word you speak to Him matters more than you ever imagined. Because there's a profound difference between hoping that God might hear your prayers and knowing with absolute certainty that He treasures every word you speak to Him. Too many believers live beneath the privilege of their prayer access because they've allowed doubt to contaminate their faith and circumstances to define their understanding of God's love. They've permitted temporary silence to convince them of permanent rejection. They've let delayed answers convince them that their prayers don't matter to the King of the universe. But you were not created to live begging for God's attention. You were designed to live knowing that you already have it completely. Starting today, you will transform your prayer life from desperate pleading to confident declaration. You will stop praying like someone trying to convince God to care about your situation and start praying like someone who knows He's already deeply invested in your success. For the next 21 days, you will begin each prayer with this declaration: God, I know you hear every word I speak, and I trust that you are working right now to answer me in ways that exceed my expectations. You will stop apologizing for bothering God with your problems and start thanking Him for the privilege of sharing your heart with the Creator of the universe. You will cease begging for His attention and start celebrating the fact that you already have complete access to His throne room 24 hours a day. Do you commit to praying for the next 21 days with the absolute confidence that God not only hears every word, but is actively working to answer you beyond your wildest dreams? Comment confident if your heart is ready to embrace this level of prayer authority that your relationship with God has earned you. The hidden answer to your desperate question is not just that God hears your prayers, but that He prioritizes them, treasures them, and responds to them with the full resources of heaven at His disposal. Your prayers are not background noise in God's presence. They are the featured presentation that captures His complete attention. Your voice is not one among billions that He struggles to distinguish. It is the unique sound that He recognizes instantly and responds to immediately, even when His response requires time to manifest perfectly. Your requests are not inconveniences that interrupt God's schedule. They are opportunities for Him to demonstrate His love, power, and faithfulness in ways that will strengthen your faith and inspire your testimony. God doesn't just hear your prayers. He celebrates them as expressions of your trust in His goodness and evidence of your relationship with Him. Every prayer is proof that you believe He cares about your life. And nothing brings God more joy than knowing that His children trust Him completely. If this revelation touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself for even one more second. Like this video, comment with the word "here," share it with your friends and family, and also in your WhatsApp groups. And of course, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving messages that strengthen faith and renew hope. Don't miss the blessings that God wants to give you today. Watch the infinite blessing videos available on our channel. If you want to support this mission, do it now. Our support email is right here below in the video description. Your immediate contribution keeps this mission alive and enables faith messages to reach where they are most needed today. If you have difficulty making the donation, ask for help from a trusted family member or friend. Don't let technology prevent you. By supporting, you become a living part of this movement of love and hope. Each donation is a seed of blessings that, if not planted today, will be lost forever. Each contribution is received with gratitude and destined exclusively for the production of new videos that inspire and transform lives. We are deeply grateful. Your generosity keeps this mission alive and allows us to reach and inspire more hearts. Act now. Be the spark that ignites hope in others. Together we multiply blessings in such a fragile world. Thank you for being part of this chain of transformation where the assurance that God hears your prayers continues bringing hope and confidence to hearts around the world.